The wind howled like a wild animal across the Montana plains, carrying snow that felt like tiny needles against Lucy's face. She pulled her old winter coat tighter around her shoulders and hurried from the barn toward the small farmhouse that had been her home for 28 years. The same house where she was born, where her parents had raised her, and where she now lived alone, fighting to keep their dream alive. The ranch looked nothing like it did in the old photos hanging in her living room. Back then the fences were straight and strong, the barn was painted bright red, and hundreds of cattle dotted the green pastures. Now the paint was peeling, several fence posts leaned at odd angles, and only 37 cattle remained from what used to be a herd of over 200. Lucy's boots crunched through the snow as she walked past the mailbox that held nothing but bad news these days. Bills, late notices, and letters from the bank that made her stomach twist into knots. The latest one sat on her kitchen table, unopened. She already knew what it said. 3 months behind on the mortgage. Final notice. 30 days to pay or lose everything. The storm was getting worse. Weather reports said it would last 3 days, with temperatures dropping to 20 below zero. Lucy had managed to get all the cattle into the shelter, but she worried about the old heating system in the barn. If it failed during this storm, she could lose half her remaining herd. As she reached for the front door handle, something caught her eye near the fence line. At first, she thought it was just a pile of old clothes or trash that had blown against the fence, but then it moved. Lucy squinted through the swirling snow. There was definitely someone out there. A person huddled against her fence, barely visible in the white chaos of the storm. Her first instinct was fear. Living alone on a remote ranch made her cautious of strangers, especially in bad weather when help was far away. But as she watched, the figure tried to stand up and immediately fell back down. Whoever it was, they were in trouble. Lucy's father had always taught her that in Montana, you help people in need, no questions asked. The land was too harsh and unforgiving to turn away from someone who might be dying. She ran back into the house and grabbed her father's old winter coat, a thermos of coffee, and a flashlight. The wind nearly knocked her over as she made her way to the fence. Up close, she could see it was a man, probably in his 30s, wearing clothes that were completely wrong for this kind of weather. His jacket was thin, his jeans were soaked through, and his boots looked expensive but offered no protection against the snow. "Hey!" she shouted over the wind. "Are you okay?" The man looked up at her with eyes that seemed too alert for someone who should have been unconscious from the cold. His lips were blue, and his whole body was shaking, but when he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, trying to stand again. "My truck broke down about 2 miles back. I was walking to find help when the storm got worse. I just needed to rest for a minute." Lucy knew that resting in this cold was the worst thing he could do. People fell asleep in weather like this and never woke up. She also knew that the nearest town was 15 miles away, and there was no way anyone could walk that distance in this storm. "Come on," she said, grabbing his arm to help him up. "We need to get you inside before you freeze to death." The man hesitated. "I don't want to be any trouble. If you could just let me use your phone to call for help, ... The phone lines are down," Lucy said, which was true. "And even if they weren't, no tow truck is coming out in this weather. You're stuck here until the storm passes." She helped him to his feet, surprised by how tall he was. Even weak from the cold, she could tell he was strong. His hands, when she grabbed them to pull him up, were rough and calloused like someone who worked with them. But something about the way he carried himself seemed different from the ranch hands and drifters, who sometimes came through looking for work. The walk to the house took forever. The man moved slowly, his legs stiff from the cold, and Lucy had to stop several times to help him keep his balance. By the time they reached the front porch, both of them were covered in snow and breathing hard. Inside, the house felt like a warm hug after the brutal cold outside. Lucy led the stranger to the old couch near the fireplace and immediately started building up the fire. The man sat down heavily, his whole body still shaking. "Take off those wet clothes," Lucy said, grabbing some old blankets from the closet. There are dry clothes in my father's room that should fit you. First door on the right down the hall. While he changed, Lucy went to the kitchen and heated up the last of the beef stew she had made 2 days ago. There wasn't much left, maybe. Enough for one good bowl, but the man needed hot food more than she did. She could always make do with bread and coffee. When he came back to the living room, he looked completely different. Her father's old flannel shirt and jeans fit him well, and with dry clothes and some color returning to his face, Lucy could see that he was actually quite handsome. His dark hair was still damp, and he had the kind of strong jaw that belonged in old Western movies. "I can't thank you enough," he said, sitting back down near the fire. "I'm Jake, by the way. Jake Miller." Lucy noticed the small pause before he said his last name, but she didn't think much of it. Lots of people who ended up on her ranch running from something or someone weren't eager to share their full stories. "I'm Lucy," she said, handing him the bowl of stew. "Lucy Chun, this is my family's ranch." Jake took the bowl gratefully and ate like someone who hadn't had a good meal in days. Lucy watched him from the kitchen, sipping her coffee and trying to figure out what to make of this unexpected guest. His story about a broken-down truck made sense, but something felt off. His clothes had been all wrong for the weather, but they looked expensive. And despite being half-frozen, he didn't seem desperate or panicked like most people would be in that situation. "This is incredible," Jake said, finishing the stew. "Best meal I've had in weeks. You're a great cook." Lucy felt herself blush a little. It had been a long time since anyone had complimented her cooking. Living alone, she usually just made simple meals for one. "It's nothing special," she said. "Just basic ranch food." "Sometimes basic is exactly what you need," Jake replied, looking around the small living room. His eyes stopped on the old photos hanging on the walls. Pictures of her grandparents, her parents, and the ranch in better times. "Your family's been here a long time," he observed. "4 generations," Lucy said proudly. "My great-grandfather bought this land in 1924, built everything from scratch." She didn't mention that she might be the last generation to live here. The bank wanted to take it all away in 30 days. That seemed like too much to share with a stranger. No matter how grateful she was for the company, outside, the storm continued to rage, and Lucy realized that Jake would probably be staying for several days. She wondered what she had gotten herself into. Lucy woke up the next morning to the sound of someone moving around in her kitchen. For a moment she panicked, forgetting about her unexpected guest. Then she smelled coffee brewing and remembered Jake. She grabbed her robe and hurried downstairs. Not sure what to expect. Jake was standing at her old stove, cooking what looked like scrambled eggs and bacon. He had found her apron hanging on a hook and tied it around his waist, which would have been funny if Lucy wasn't so confused about where the food had come from. "Good morning," Jake said with a smile. "I hope you don't mind that I borrowed your kitchen. I found some eggs in the refrigerator and bacon in the freezer. Thought I'd make breakfast as a small thank you for saving my life last night." Lucy looked in her refrigerator. She was sure she only had 3 eggs left, but somehow there were a dozen sitting on the shelf. And she definitely didn't have bacon. She had been living on beans, rice, and whatever vegetables she could afford for the past month. "Where did all this food come from?" she asked. Jake paused for just a second before answering. "I had some supplies in my truck. Managed to get back there early this morning when the wind died down a bit. Figured I should contribute something since you're letting me stay." Lucy looked out the window. The storm was still going strong, and she could barely see the barn through the blowing snow. There was no way anyone could have walked 2 miles to a broken-down truck and back in these conditions. But the food was real, and it smelled amazing, so she decided not to ask too many questions. "You didn't have to do this," she said, sitting down at the small kitchen table. "But I have to admit it's been a while since I've had a breakfast like this." Jake served her a plate piled high with fluffy eggs and crispy bacon, along with toast. Made from bread she was pretty sure she didn't have yesterday. He poured her coffee from a bag of beans that was definitely not the cheap instant coffee she had been drinking for months. "So what do you do, Jake?" Lucy asked between bites. "I mean, when you're not rescuing supplies from broken down trucks and blizzards? A little bit of everything, Jake said, sitting down across from her. I've worked on ranches, construction sites, whatever needs doing. Been traveling around for a while now, seeing different parts of the country. And you just happened to be driving through Montana in the middle of winter? Jake's smile faltered slightly. Sometimes you end up places you didn't plan to be. Lucy recognized that tone. She had heard it from other drifters who had worked on the ranch over the years. Men and women running from something, starting over, or just trying to figure out what came next in their lives. She decided not to push for more details after breakfast. Jake insisted on helping with the morning chores. Lucy tried to tell him he didn't need to work, that he was a guest, but he wouldn't hear it. I'm not the type to sit around while there's work to be done, he said. Besides, I want to earn my keep. They bundled up and headed out to the barn to check on the cattle. The storm was still fierce, but the animals seemed comfortable in their shelter. Lucy was relieved to see that the old heating system was still working. What surprised her was how naturally Jake moved around the cattle. Most people who weren't used to being around large animals were nervous, but Jake walked among them like he had been doing it his whole life. He seemed to know exactly which cows were pregnant, which ones might be getting sick, and how to move them without causing stress. You've definitely done this before, Lucy observed. Spent some time on ranches growing up, Jake said, examining one of the older cows with a practiced eye. This one here is going to need some extra attention. See how she's favoring her left. Front leg? Probably just a minor injury, but it could get worse if we don't take care of it. Lucy looked at the cow more closely. She had noticed the animal moving a little slowly, but hadn't caught the subtle limp that Jake spotted immediately. She made a mental note to call the veterinarian as soon as the phone lines were back up. They spent the rest of the morning fixing a broken water trough and reinforcing a section of fence that had been damaged by the wind. Jake worked with confidence and skill, using tools like someone who had been around ranches his whole life. But Lucy noticed other things too. His hands were calloused, but his fingernails were clean and well-maintained. When he rolled up his sleeves, she caught a glimpse of what looked like an expensive watch. And despite claiming to be a drifter, his teeth were perfect, and his skin had the healthy glow of someone who ate well and took care of himself by lunchtime. They had accomplished more work than Lucy usually got done in a week. Jake had also somehow produced sandwich meat and fresh vegetables for lunch, claiming he had grabbed them from his truck along with the breakfast supplies. Your truck must have been really well stocked, Lucy said, trying to keep her tone light. I like to be prepared, Jake replied. Never know when you might get stuck somewhere for a few days. That afternoon, the storm finally started to calm down. Lucy was both relieved and disappointed. Relieved because she had been worried about her cattle and her heating bills. Disappointed because it meant Jake would probably be leaving soon. And she had enjoyed having someone to talk to, but Jake didn't seem to be in any hurry to leave. When Lucy mentioned that the roads would probably be clear enough for travel by the next day, he just nodded and said he wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. Actually, he said, I was wondering if you might need some help around here for a while. I'm pretty handy with repairs and I know cattle. I wouldn't expect much in terms of pay, just a place to sleep and meals. Lucy's heart jumped. She desperately needed help on the ranch, but she had no money to pay anyone. The idea of having Jake stay longer was tempting for more reasons than just the work. She had felt more relaxed and happy in the past day than she had in months. I can't really afford to pay hired help right now, she admitted. Like I said, I don't need much. Just a roof over my head and 3 meals a day. I'm between jobs anyway, and this seems like a good place to spend some time. Lucy looked around at all the things that needed fixing, all the work that was too much for one person. Having help, even temporary help, could make a huge difference. Well, she said slowly, I suppose you could stay in the barn. There's a small room in the back that my father used to use for hired hands. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry. That sounds perfect, Jake said. You won't regret this, Lucy, I promise. As they walked back to the house, Lucy wondered what she was getting herself into. Jake seemed too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But she was also practical enough to know that she needed help, and proud enough to prefer earning assistance rather than accepting charity. What she didn't know was that Jake had made several phone calls that morning, not from a broken-down truck, but from a satellite phone hidden in his jacket. And the person on the other end of those calls would have been very interested to know that the mysterious billionaire who owned half of Montana had just convinced a struggling rancher to let him work as a hired hand. 3 weeks after the storm, Lucy couldn't believe how much her life had changed. Jake had settled into the small room behind the barn like he had always lived there, and every day brought new surprises that Lucy was starting to think of as small miracles. It started with the broken tractor that had been sitting useless in the barn for 6 months. Lucy had gotten quotes from 3 different repair shops, and the cheapest estimate was still more money than she had. She had resigned herself to doing all the heavy work by hand, which made everything take twice as long. On Jake's 3rd day, he had asked if he could take a look at it. "I'm pretty good with engines," he had said modestly. Lucy had expected him to poke around for a while and confirm what she already knew, that it needed expensive parts and professional repair. Instead, Jake had spent 2 days taking the engine apart and putting it back together. He had somehow found replacement parts that fit perfectly, though he claimed he had traded some favors with a guy in town when the tractor started up on the first try. Purring like it was brand new, Lucy had almost cried with relief. "Where did you learn to do that?" she had asked. "You pick things up when you work different places," Jake had replied, wiping his hands on an old rag. Engines are engines, whether they're in trucks, tractors, or generators. The next miracle was the feed situation. Lucy had been struggling to afford enough quality feed for her cattle, which meant they weren't gaining weight properly. Thin cattle brought lower prices at market, which meant even less money to buy feed. It was a cycle that was slowly destroying her herd. Jake had offered to drive into town to pick up supplies, and when he came back, his truck was loaded with premium feed that cost 3 times what Lucy usually bought. "I found a guy who had ordered too much," Jake explained. "Got it for the same price as the cheap stuff." Lucy had never heard of feed suppliers making that kind of mistake, but the cattle loved the new feed. Within a week, she could see the difference in their condition. They were more active, their coats were shinier, and the pregnant cows looked healthier than they had in months. Then there was the veterinarian visit. Dr. Rodriguez had been Lucy's family's vet for 20 years, but Lucy hadn't been able to afford his services in over 6 months. She had been treating sick animals herself with advice from YouTube videos and old veterinary books. Jake had mentioned that one of the cows was showing signs of infection and really needed professional attention. Lucy had explained that she couldn't afford a vet visit right now, especially for something that might not be serious. The next day, Dr. Rodriguez's truck had pulled into her driveway. "Got a call about a sick cow," he had said when Lucy met him at the barn, confused. "I didn't call you," Lucy had said. "Someone did. Paid for the visit in advance, actually. Said they were concerned about your herd." Dr. Rodriguez had examined not just the sick cow, but every animal on the ranch. He had given vaccinations that were overdue, treated minor injuries, and left behind enough medicine to last for months. When Lucy had asked who had paid for all this, he had just shrugged and said someone had sent cash in an envelope with instructions to take care of her cattle. Lucy had confronted Jake about it that evening. "Did you have something to do with Dr. Rodriguez's visit?" Jake had been sitting by the fire, reading one of her father's old books about cattle breeding. He had looked up with an innocent expression. "I might have mentioned to someone in town that you had a sick cow. Word gets around in small communities. People help each other out." "Someone paid hundreds of dollars for that visit, Jake. That's not just neighbors helping out." "Maybe you have a secret admirer," Jake had said with a grin. "Or maybe there are more good people in the world than you think." The miracles kept coming. The feed store gave her credit when she had never qualified before. The equipment rental place let her borrow tools for free. The local grocery store started carrying organic vegetables that Jake somehow always came home with. claiming they were day-old and being sold cheap. Lucy's favorite miracle, though, was the evening conversations. After dinner, she and Jake would sit by the fire and talk about everything and nothing. Jake was an excellent listener who asked thoughtful questions about her dreams for the ranch, her family's history, and her plans for the future. What would you do if money wasn't an issue? Jake had asked one evening. Build up the herd again? Lucy had said without hesitation. Get back to the size we were when my father was running things. Maybe specialize in organic, grass-fed beef. There's a growing market for that. What's stopping you? Lucy had laughed, but not in a happy way. Besides the fact that I'm 3 months behind on my mortgage and about to lose everything, not much. Jake had gotten quiet after that, and Lucy had worried that she had shared too much. She didn't usually talk about her financial problems with anyone, but something about Jake made her feel safe opening up. Have you talked to the bank about restructuring your loan? Jake had asked. They're not interested in working with me. They want their money, and if I can't pay, they want the land. Banks can be convinced to be flexible if you approach them the right way. You sound like you know something about dealing with banks? Jake had smiled mysteriously. I've picked up a few things over the years. The biggest miracle happened at the end of the 3rd week. Lucy had been dreading a call from the bank, expecting them to start foreclosure proceedings. Instead, she got a call saying that her loan had been selected for a special assistance program that would allow her to make smaller payments for the next year while she got back on her feet. I've never heard of this program, Lucy had told the bank representative. It's new, the woman had said. Designed to help struggling ranchers who show potential for recovery. Your application was very compelling. I didn't submit an application. Someone submitted it on your behalf. A reference who spoke very highly of your work ethic and potential. When Lucy had hung up the phone, she had found Jake in the barn, apparently fixing a loose board. Jake, did you help me apply for some kind of bank program? What kind of program? The bank called. They're restructuring my loan, giving me a year to get caught up with smaller payments. Jake had looked pleased but not surprised. That's great news, Lucy. You deserve a break. This is more than a break. This is exactly what I needed to save the ranch. And it happened right after you showed up? Sometimes good things just happen when you least expect them. That night, Lucy had lain awake thinking about all the good things that had happened since Jake's arrival. The repaired tractor, the cheap feed, the free veterinary care, the restructured loan. Each one by itself could be explained as coincidence or luck. But all of them together? That seemed like more than chance. She was beginning to suspect that Jake was not who he claimed to be, but she was also beginning to realize that she didn't care. Whoever he was, whatever he was doing, it was saving her ranch and giving her hope for the first time in months. What she didn't know was that Jake was making phone calls every morning before she woke up, using a satellite phone to coordinate with people who could make things happen. People who worked for companies that Jake owned, banks that Jake had relationships with, and suppliers who valued Jake's business enough to extend unusual favors. Jake was discovering that helping Lucy felt better than any business deal he had ever made, and he was starting to worry about what would happen when she found out the truth. Lucy first noticed the phone calls during the 4th week of Jake's stay. She had gotten up early to check on a cow that was close to giving birth, and as she walked past the barn, she heard Jake's voice coming from inside. He was speaking quietly, but in the still morning air, his words carried clearly through the wooden walls. The Peterson property needs attention too, he was saying. Same situation as here. Set up the feed discount and get Rodriguez over there this week. Lucy paused, wondering who Jake could be talking to at 5 in the morning. She crept closer to the barn, feeling guilty about eavesdropping, but too curious to walk away. No, don't. Make it obvious, Jake continued. It has to look natural. These people have pride. They won't accept charity, but they'll take a fair deal. There was a long pause while Jake listened to whoever was on the other end, the Morrison Ranch too. How bad is their situation? Another pause. Okay, get them on the feed program, and see if we can do something about their equipment loan. Maybe buy the debt and restructure the terms. Lucy's mind was racing. The Peterson Ranch was about 10 miles south of hers, and she knew they had been struggling almost as badly as she was. The Morrisons lived even further out, but she had heard rumors that they were facing foreclosure too. How did Jake know about their problems? And how was he arranging help for them? She heard footsteps moving toward the barn door and quickly hurried back to the house, pretending to be busy in the kitchen when Jake came in a few minutes later. "Morning, Lucy," he said cheerfully. "How's our expectant mother doing?" "Still waiting," Lucy replied, trying to keep her voice normal. "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you know the Peterson family? They have a ranch about 10 miles south of here." Jake paused for just a moment while buttering his toast. "I might have met them in town. Why?" "Just wondering. I heard they've been having some financial troubles like a lot of ranchers around here." "It's tough times for small operations," Jake agreed, "but sometimes help comes from unexpected places." Over the next few days, Lucy started paying more attention to Jake's phone habits. He always seemed to step outside or go to the barn when his phone rang, which happened at least twice a day. When she asked about it, he would say it was just people he knew from his travels, other ranch hands looking for work or asking for advice, but the conversations she overheard didn't sound like casual chats with drifters. They sounded like business calls. Jake talked about properties and investments and board decisions. He mentioned names of towns across Montana and discussed financial arrangements that sounded far too complex for a wandering ranch hand, Lucy's. Suspicions grew stronger when she ran into Carol Peterson at the grocery store in town. "Lucy," Carol had said, rushing over with a huge smile, "isn't it wonderful about the feed program?" "Feed program?" "The discount program through Henderson's feed store. We're getting premium feed for the same price as the regular stuff. The manager said a new supplier was offering special deals to help local ranchers. You must be part of it too, right?" "I know you've been using Henderson's." Lucy had indeed been getting the same discount, though Jake had told her it was just a lucky break with overstocked inventory. "When did this start?" Lucy had asked. "About 3 weeks ago." "Same time you got that handsome hired man, from what I hear," Carol had winked. "Maybe he's your good luck charm." That afternoon, Lucy had driven by the Morrison Ranch on her way back from town. She was surprised to see Dr. Rodriguez's truck in their driveway and several pieces of new equipment in their yard. For a family that was supposedly facing bankruptcy, they seemed to be doing remarkably well all of a sudden. When she got home, she found Jake in the barn, apparently on another phone call. This time, she didn't try to hide her eavesdropping. "The Thompson place needs a new well," Jake was saying. "Their water system is failing, and they can't afford to drill. Can we arrange something through the County Development Fund?" Lucy stepped into the barn, and Jake quickly ended the call. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a friend who works for the county heard about some programs that might help local ranchers." "Jake, what's really going on?" "Every rancher in this area is suddenly getting help at the same time you show up. That's not a coincidence." Jake sat down on a hay bale and looked at her seriously. "Lucy, what if I told you that there are people out there who care about what happens to family ranches? People with resources who want to help but don't want credit for it?" "I'd say that sounds too good to be true." "Sometimes good things happen. Sometimes there are people who remember what it was like to struggle and want to help others who are going through the same thing. And these people just happen to notice all the ranchers in our area at the same time. Word gets around. When one rancher starts getting help, others hear about it. People talk." Lucy wanted to believe him, but something still felt off. That evening, she decided to do some investigating of her own. She called her neighbor Tom, who lived between her place and the Peterson Ranch. "Tom, have you noticed anything unusual lately? Any strange vehicles or new people around?" "Funny you should ask," Tom said. "Been seeing a lot more activity on the old logging road that runs behind your place. Expensive-looking trucks and SUVs. Not the kind of vehicles you usually see out." "Here, when did this start?" "Oh, about a month ago." "Right around the time you got that hired man?" Speaking of which, Carol Peterson mentioned he might be available for some work when he's done at your place. Where did you find him? Lucy realized she didn't have a good answer to that question. Jake had never really explained where he had been. Going when his truck supposedly broke down, or where he had come from before that. The next morning, Lucy got up even earlier and positioned herself where she could watch the barn without being seen. Sure enough, Jake emerged at 5 o'clock and walked toward the back of the property, where the old logging road connected to her land. Lucy followed at a distance, staying hidden behind trees and outbuildings. Jake walked about half a mile down the logging road to where a black SUV was parked. A woman in a business suit got out of the vehicle and handed Jake a folder of papers. They talked for about 10 minutes, too quietly for Lucy to hear, before the woman got back in the SUV and drove away. Jake stood there for a moment, looking through the papers before walking back toward the barn. Lucy hurried back to the house, her mind spinning with questions. Who was the woman in the suit? Why was she meeting Jake in secret? What was in the folder? That evening, Lucy confronted Jake directly. I saw you this morning, Jake, meeting someone on the logging road. Jake's face went completely still. Lucy. I know you're not who you say you are. I know you're behind all the help that local ranchers have been getting. What I don't know is why or what you want in return. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, more serious, less casual. You're right. I'm not just a drifter looking for work, but everything I've told you about wanting to help is true. Then tell me the truth, all of it. Jake looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. The truth is complicated, Lucy, and once you know it, everything between us will change. It's already changing. I need to know who you really are. Jake nodded slowly. Okay, but not here, and not tonight. Tomorrow I'll show you everything. But I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me that you'll listen to the whole story before you decide what to think. And promise me that no matter what you learn about who I am, you'll remember that everything I've done here has been real. Lucy studied his face in the firelight. Whatever Jake was hiding, it was big, but she had come too far to back down now. I promise, she said, but no more secrets after tomorrow. No more secrets, Jake agreed. Neither of them slept well that night, both knowing that everything was about to change. The black SUV arrived at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, just as Jake had said it would. Lucy watched from the kitchen window as the same woman she had seen the day before got out of the vehicle, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 men in expensive suits followed her, all of them walking toward the house with the confidence of people who were used to being in charge. Lucy's stomach twisted with anxiety. Jake had asked her to trust him, but seeing these obviously wealthy and powerful people coming to her modest ranch made her feel like she was about to be swept up in something much bigger than she could handle. Jake met them at the front door, and Lucy was shocked by the change in his demeanor. Gone was the easygoing ranch hand who had been fixing her fences and feeding her cattle. In his place was someone who clearly commanded respect. The woman and the 2 men deferred to him in a way that made it obvious he was their boss, not the other way around. Lucy, Jake said, his voice formal in a way she had never heard before, I'd like you to meet Rebecca Martinez, my chief financial officer, and David Wong and Michael Torres from my legal team. Lucy's mind went blank. Chief financial officer? Legal team? Jake had a legal team? Miss Chun, Rebecca said, extending her hand with a professional smile. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Jake has told us so much about you and your ranch. Sorry, Lucy said, feeling completely lost. I don't understand what's happening here. Jake gestured toward the living room. Why don't we sit down? I have a lot to explain. They gathered around Lucy's small coffee table, the expensive suits looking out of place among her father's old furniture and family photos. Rebecca pulled out a tablet and several folders while the 2 lawyers sat quietly with briefcases at their feet. Lucy, Jake began, my real name is Jake Harrison. I own Harrison Ranch Holdings, which is the largest ranch and agricultural company in Montana. Lucy stared at him. Harrison Ranch Holdings. She had heard the name before. Everyone In Montana had heard of Harrison Ranch Holdings. They own millions of acres across the state and were worth billions of dollars. You're saying you own Harrison Ranch Holdings? I inherited it from my grandfather 5 years ago when I was 25. It includes over 2 million acres of ranch land, processing facilities, and agricultural businesses throughout Montana and Wyoming. Lucy felt like the room was spinning. 2 million acres? Rebecca leaned forward. Jake is one of the largest private landowners in the United States. Harrison Ranch Holdings employs over 3,000 people and generates more than $1 billion in revenue annually. I don't understand, Lucy said weakly. If you're some kind of billionaire rancher, what are you doing here? What do you want with my ranch? Jake held up his hand to stop Rebecca from answering. I want to explain this myself. Lucy, for the past 3 years, I've been traveling around Montana, visiting small ranches and learning about the challenges that family operations face. But I've been doing it secretly because I wanted to understand the real problems without people treating me differently because of who I am. You've been lying to people. I've been trying to learn the truth. When you're Jake Harrison, heir to a ranch empire, people tell you what they think you want to hear. When you're Jake Miller, a drifter looking for work, people tell you what's really happening in their lives. Lucy stood up abruptly, needing to move. So this has all been some kind of research project? I've been like a lab rat for you to study? No, Jake said firmly, also standing. It started that way, but it became something completely different. What do you mean? Jake looked at his employees. Could you give us a few minutes alone? Rebecca and the lawyers gathered their materials and stepped outside. When they were gone, Jake sat back down and gestured for Lucy to join him. Lucy, I came here because I had been tracking predatory lending practices targeting small ranches. Your bank, First Montana Trust, has been systematically targeting struggling family operations, offering loans with impossible terms, then foreclosing when people can't pay. My bank? They've foreclosed on over 40 family ranches in the past 2 years, then sold the land to developers for shopping centers and housing subdivisions. It's a deliberate strategy to eliminate small ranchers and convert agricultural land to commercial use. Lucy sank back into her chair. Are you saying they never intended to work with me, that they wanted me to fail? I'm saying that your loan was structured to be impossible to repay on schedule. The same with the Petersons, the Morrisons, and dozens of other families. But you fixed my loan situation. I bought your debt from the bank and restructured it through one of my companies. Same with the other ranchers who have been getting help. I've been systematically buying up the predatory loans and converting them to reasonable terms that people can actually manage. Lucy's head was spinning. You bought my debt? So you own my ranch? Technically, my company holds the mortgage. But the terms are designed to help you succeed, not fail. The goal is for you to eventually own your land free and clear. Why? Lucy asked. Why would you do that for strangers? Jake was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the pastures, where Lucy's cattle were grazing. Because I remember what my grandfather told me about why he started ranching. He said the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land. Our job is to take care of it and the animals, and to help the next generation do the same. But you could just buy all these ranches yourself? You obviously have the money. I could. And for a while, that's what Harrison Ranch Holdings was doing? We were buying struggling operations and converting them to large-scale commercial ranching. It was profitable, but it was also destroying something important. What do you mean? Family. Ranches aren't just businesses, Lucy. They're communities. They're traditions. They're people who have a connection to the land that goes back generations. When you replace family ranches with corporate operations, you lose something that can't be measured in dollars and cents. Rebecca knocked on the door and stepped back inside. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a conference call with the board. In 30 minutes, Jake nodded. Lucy, I know this is a lot to process, but I want you to understand that everything I've done here has been real. The work, the conversations, He paused, looking at her with an expression that made her heart skip a beat. The feelings I've developed for you. None of that was part of any business plan. How do I know what's real and what's not? Lucy asked. You've been lying to me for weeks. Because you know me, Lucy. You've seen who I am when I thought no one was watching. You've seen how I treat your animals, how I care about this land, how I feel about you. That person is real, even if the name I gave you wasn't. Lucy looked at Rebecca and the lawyers, then back at Jake. I need time to think about this, all of this. Of course, Jake said. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that regardless of what you decide about me personally, the help for your ranch and the other family operations will continue. That's not dependent on anything else. And if I want you to leave? Jake's face fell slightly, but his voice remained steady. Then I'll leave. But I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that my feelings for you are real and that my commitment to helping family ranchers like you is genuine. After Jake and his team left, Lucy sat alone in her living room trying to process everything. She had learned. The man she had been falling in love with was one of the richest people in Montana. He had been lying to her about who he was, but telling the truth about everything else. She walked out to the pasture where her cattle were grazing on the premium feed that Jake had provided. The animals looked healthier than they had in years. Her tractor was running perfectly. Her mortgage was manageable. Her ranch, which had been on the verge of foreclosure a month ago, was now stable and profitable. But the man who had made it all possible had built their entire relationship on a lie. Lucy didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. What she did know was that everything had changed, and she had no idea what came next. 3 days passed before Lucy was ready to hear the rest of Jake's story. She had spent those days working alone on the ranch, taking care of her cattle, and trying to sort through her complicated feelings about everything she had learned. The work felt different now, knowing that the feed in the barn and the functioning tractor in the shed were gifts from a billionaire rather than the lucky breaks she had thought they were. On the 4th morning, Jake returned alone. No expensive SUV, no lawyers or financial advisors. Just Jake driving the same pickup truck he had been using all along, wearing the same work clothes he had worn every day on the ranch. Lucy was mending fence when she saw him pull into the driveway. Her heart started beating faster, and she realized that despite everything, she was glad to see him. That realization confused her even more. Can we talk? Jake called out as he walked toward her. Lucy set down her tools and met him halfway across the pasture. In the morning sunlight, he looked like the same man who had helped her through the worst crisis of her life, but everything felt different now. I've been doing some research, Lucy said without preamble. About you, about Harrison Ranch Holdings, about everything you told me. And what did you find? I found out that you weren't lying about the predatory lending. First Montana Trust has been targeting small ranches for years. I also found out that you've been quietly buying up their bad loans and restructuring them for dozens of families across the state. Jake nodded. What else? I found out that your grandfather, William Harrison, started with a single ranch in 1952 and built it into an empire through hard work and fair dealing. He was known for helping other ranchers during tough times. He was a good man. He taught me that success means nothing if you use it to hurt people instead of helping them. Lucy studied Jake's face. I also found out that you disappeared from Public View 3 years ago. The business magazines all speculated that you were having some kind of breakdown or midlife crisis. Jake smiled for the first time since arriving. A midlife crisis at 28? That's a little early, don't you think? So what really happened 3 years ago? Jake gestured toward a fallen log near the fence line. Can we sit? This is going to take a while. They settled on the log, looking out over the pasture where Lucy's cattle were grazing peacefully. Jake was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When I inherited the company, I thought I knew everything about ranching. I had grown up around it, went to college for agricultural business, worked my way through different departments of the company. I thought I understood what we did and why we did it, but you didn't? I understood the business side. I could read financial reports, analyze market trends, make strategic decisions that increased profits. But I had no idea what it felt like to worry about losing everything you've worked for. Jake picked up a handful of dirt and let it run through his fingers. I was in my office one day, reviewing a proposal to acquire 12 family ranches that were in financial trouble. On paper, it looked like a great deal. We could buy them cheap, consolidate the operations, and increase efficiency. The profit projections were impressive. What changed your mind? I realized I didn't know anything about the 12 families who would lose their homes and their livelihoods. To me, they were just numbers on a spreadsheet. I decided I needed to understand what it really meant to be a small rancher before I made decisions that would affect so many people. So you started pretending to be someone else? I started learning what it means to struggle. I've worked on dozens of ranches over the past 3 years, always under different names, always as just another hired hand. I've seen families lose everything because of decisions made by companies like mine. Lucy thought about this. But you've also been helping people, using your real identity to buy up bad loans and restructure them. That started about a year ago when I realized that just understanding the problem wasn't enough. I had the resources to actually fix some of the damage that was being done to family ranches. But I also knew that if people found out Jake Harrison was behind the help, it would change everything. How so? People have pride, Lucy. If you knew that the richest rancher in Montana was paying your bills, how would that make you feel? Lucy considered this, probably like a charity case. Exactly. But if you thought you were getting lucky breaks and fair deals, you could accept the help without feeling like you owed someone something you could never repay. So you've been living a double life. Jake Miller the drifter and Jake Harrison the billionaire. It sounds crazy when you put it like that. It is crazy, but it's also... Lucy searched for the right word. It's kind of amazing how many rich people would give up their comfortable lives to work on failing ranches for 3 years. Jake looked at her with surprise. You're not angry anymore? I'm still angry. You lied to me about who you are, but I'm beginning to understand why you did it. What I don't understand is why you told me the truth now. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Because I fell in love with you and I couldn't keep lying to someone I love. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. You love me? I love everything about you, Lucy. Your strength, your dedication to this ranch. The way you care for your animals, the way you welcomed a stranger into your home during a storm. I love the woman who would give her last bowl of stew to someone she'd never met. But you're Jake Harrison. You could have anyone. Why would you want a struggling rancher who can barely keep her operation running? Because you're real, Lucy. In my world, most people want something from me. Money, connections, business deals. You're the first person in years who has cared about me without knowing what I could do for them. Lucy felt tears building in her eyes. How do I know that's true? How do I know this isn't just some rich man's fantasy about playing cowboy with a simple country girl? Jake reached over and took her hands. Because you know me. You've seen me at 5 in the morning, taking care of sick cattle. You've seen me work 16-hour days fixing fences and hauling feed. You've seen me when I'm tired, when I'm frustrated, when I'm happy. That person is real, Lucy. The name doesn't matter. The name matters, Jake. The money matters. The fact that you own half of Montana matters. Why? Because we're not equals. You're playing at being a ranch hand, but I actually am one. This ranch, this life, this is all I have. For you, it's just an experience. Jake stood up and walked a few steps away, then turned back to face her. You're wrong about that, Lucy. This isn't just an experience for me anymore. This place, these people, this life, it's become more important to me than anything I left behind. What are you saying? I'm saying that I want to make this real. I want to help you build this ranch into something amazing. I want to use my resources to support family ranchers across Montana. And I want to do it with you as partners. Lucy stared at him. Partners? Business partners, life partners, whatever you're willing to consider. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with business and everything to do with the fact that you're the most genuine person I've ever met. Lucy stood up and walked over to the fence, looking out at her cattle. Everything Jake was saying sounded wonderful, but she was still afraid to trust it. I need more time to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need, Jake replied. But while you're thinking, remember this. Everything good that's happened between us happened when you thought I was nobody special. That person is still who I am. As Jake drove away, Lucy realized that her biggest fear wasn't that he was lying to her. Her biggest fear was that he was telling the truth, and that she was about to have everything she had ever dreamed of. A week went by without any word from Jake, and Lucy found herself missing him more than she wanted to admit. The ranch felt empty without his presence, and she caught herself looking toward the barn where he had stayed, half expecting to see him emerge with that easy smile and a plan for the day's work. She was checking on a pregnant cow when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, she heard a familiar voice. Lucy, this is Rebecca Martinez, Jake's CFO. We met last week. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Lucy's stomach tightened. Is Jake okay? He's fine. But I'm calling because we've discovered something that affects you and all the other ranchers. Jake has been helping. Can I come by this afternoon? This is something we need to discuss in person. 2 hours later, Rebecca arrived alone. Driving a practical sedan instead of the intimidating black SUV, she looked less formal than she had during their first meeting, wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of a business suit. Thank you for seeing me, Rebecca said as they sat down at Lucy's kitchen table. I know the situation with Jake has been complicated, but what I'm here to discuss goes beyond personal relationships. What's wrong? Rebecca pulled out a folder of documents. We've been investigating First Montana Trust's lending practices, and we've discovered something much worse than predatory loans. They're part of a larger scheme involving several banks, development companies, and even some government officials. What kind of scheme? They've been systematically targeting family ranches in areas that have been designated for future commercial development. The banks offer impossible loans, wait for people to default, then sell the foreclosed properties to specific development companies at below-market prices. Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying they plan to steal our ranches? I'm saying they've already stolen dozens of them. Your ranch, the Peterson place, the Morrison property, you're all sitting on land that's been earmarked for a massive shopping and residential development project called Montana Vista. Rebecca spread out maps and documents showing Lucy's area, marked with different colored zones. This entire region is supposed to be converted to commercial use over the next 5 years. The developers have been buying up the land piece by piece, using the banks to force out the existing owners. But Jake bought our loans. We're not in danger of foreclosure anymore. That's where things get complicated. The developers aren't happy that their land acquisition plan has been disrupted. They've been pressuring the banks to find ways to invalidate the loan transfers that Jake arranged. Lucy's heart started racing. Can they do that? They're trying. They've filed lawsuits claiming that the loan sales were fraudulent, and they're pressuring local officials to use eminent domain to force property sales for public development purposes. What does that mean for us? It means you're all in danger of losing your ranches anyway, unless we can prove that the original scheme was illegal and get the development project shut down. Lucy felt overwhelmed. What can we do? That's why I'm here. Jake has a plan, but it requires the cooperation of all the affected ranchers. He wants to fight back, but he can't do it alone. What kind of plan? Rebecca leaned forward. Jake wants to organize all the family ranchers in this area into a collective legal challenge against the banks and developers. But more than that, he wants to create a model for sustainable family ranching that proves these operations are more valuable to the community than shopping centers. How? By creating a cooperative organization that provides shared resources, marketing, and financial support for family ranches. Something that makes small operations profitable and sustainable long-term. Lucy thought about this. That sounds like something that would take years to develop? It would. But Jake is committed to making it work. He's prepared to invest whatever it takes to prove that family ranching can be economically viable and environmentally sustainable. And he wants me to be part of this? Rebecca smiled. He wants you to lead it. Lucy, he thinks you understand both the challenges and the potential better than anyone else he's met. I don't have any experience running that kind of organization. But you have something more important. You have credibility with other family ranchers. They trust you because you're one of them. If Jake Harrison tries to organize them, they'll see it as a rich man trying to control their lives. If you organize them, they'll see it as a neighbor trying to help. Lucy walked to the window and looked out at her pastures. The idea was exciting, but also terrifying. What would Jake's role be? He would provide financial backing and business expertise, but you would be the face of the organization. The ranchers would work with you, not with Harrison Ranch Holdings. And personally? What? About Jake and me? Rebecca's expression softened. That's not my business, Lucy, but I can tell you that I've worked for Jake for 3 years, and I've never seen him care about anything the way he cares about this project. And about you. He told you about his feelings for me? He didn't have. 2. It's obvious to anyone who sees you two together. The question is whether you can separate your personal feelings from the business opportunity. Lucy turned back to Rebecca. What if I say no? What if I don't want to be part of this? Then Jake will find another way to fight the development scheme, but it will be much harder without the cooperation of the local ranchers. And honestly, your chances of keeping your individual ranches will be much lower. You're saying I don't really have a choice. I'm saying you have a choice between fighting back as part of a group or trying to survive on your own. The developers aren't going to give up just because Jake bought your loans. They have too much money invested in this project. Lucy sat back down at the table. If I agree to this, what would it actually involve? Rebecca pulled out another set of documents. Jake has already started setting up the legal structure for the cooperative. He's prepared to contribute $50 million in initial funding, plus ongoing support as needed. The goal would be to sign up at least 20 family ranches in this area, share resources like equipment and veterinary services, and develop joint marketing for premium beef products. $50 million? That's just the beginning. Jake thinks this model could be expanded across the entire state if it works here. Lucy's head was spinning. Why is he willing to invest so much money in this? Because he believes it's the right thing to do. And because he's learned that the traditional model of corporate ranching isn't sustainable long-term? Small family operations are more environmentally responsible, produce higher quality products, and create stronger communities. You really think this could work? I think it's the best chance you have to save your ranch and your way of life. But it's going to require a lot of work. And it's going to require you to trust Jake despite everything that's happened between you. That evening, Lucy called her neighbors the Petersons and the Morrisons, as well as several other ranching families in the area. She explained what Rebecca had told her about the development scheme and asked if they would be interested in meeting to discuss fighting back. The response was immediate and unanimous. Everyone wanted to meet. 2 days later, 15 ranching families gathered in Lucy's barn to hear Jake's proposal. He presented his plan simply and honestly, acknowledging that he had been operating under false pretenses but explaining his genuine commitment to helping family ranches survive. The discussion was heated, with some ranchers suspicious of Jake's motives and others worried about getting involved in a legal battle with powerful developers. But in the end, they voted unanimously to move forward with the cooperative. We'll try your plan, Jake, said Frank Peterson. But Lucy is going to be our leader, not you. We'll work with you, but we're working for her, Jake nodded. That's exactly what I hoped you would say. As the other ranchers left, Lucy and Jake found themselves alone in the barn where their relationship had begun. Are you sure about this? Lucy asked. $50 million is a lot of money to risk on an experiment. It's not an experiment. Lucy, it's an investment in the future. And it's an investment in you. What if I mess it up? Jake smiled. Then we'll figure out how to fix it together. That's what partners do. For the first time since learning Jake's true identity, Lucy felt like they might actually have a chance to make this work, both the business partnership and the personal relationship that she was finally ready to admit she wanted. 1 year later, Lucy stood on the front porch of her ranch house, watching the sun rise over pastures that looked completely different from the struggling operation Jake had found during that winter storm. The fences were straight and strong. The barn had been rebuilt with modern equipment, and over 200 head of prime cattle grazed contentedly in the green fields, but the biggest change wasn't visible from the porch. It was the sense of community and security that had grown among the ranching families who had joined what they now called the Montana Family Ranch Cooperative. The fight against the development scheme had taken 8 months and cost more money than Lucy had ever imagined, but they had won. The investigation that Jake's legal team initiated had uncovered corruption reaching from local banks all the way to state government officials. 3 bank executives had been arrested, 2 development companies had been forced to pay massive fines, and the Montana Vista project had been permanently shut down. More importantly, the cooperative had become everything Jake had hoped it would be. 23 family ranches now worked together, sharing equipment, veterinary services, and marketing their beef under a premium brand that commanded top prices in restaurants across the country. What had started as a desperate effort to save their land had become a model for sustainable family ranching that was attracting attention from agricultural experts. Nationwide, Lucy heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Jake emerging from the house, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and stood beside her on the porch, looking out over the ranch they now managed together. "Big day today," he said. Lucy smiled. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Jake admitted. "What about you?" "The same." Today was the day they would officially announce their engagement to the other members of the cooperative at the monthly meeting. It had taken Lucy most of the year to feel comfortable with the idea of marrying someone as wealthy and powerful as Jake, but she had gradually come to understand that his money didn't define their relationship any more than her struggles had. Defined her. The turning point had come 6 months earlier, when Jake had quietly transferred ownership of his Harrison Ranch Holdings empire to a trust that would use the profits to support family ranching operations across the country. He had kept enough money to live comfortably, but he had given up his billionaire status to focus on the work that had become his passion. "You didn't have to do that," Lucy had told him when he explained what he had done. "Yes, I did," Jake had replied. "I couldn't ask you to marry someone who had more money than some small countries. That's not who I want to be anymore." "And who do you want to be?" "I want to be the man who helps you turn this ranch into something amazing. I want to be the man who proves that family operations can compete with corporate agriculture. I want to be your partner in every sense of the word." Now, a year after that first storm brought them together, Lucy felt like they had built something real and lasting. Not just their relationship, but a new model for how ranching could work in the modern world. The sound of vehicles pulling into the driveway interrupted her thoughts. The other cooperative members were arriving for their monthly meeting, which today included a celebration of the cooperative's first anniversary and the announcement of several new families who wanted to join. Rebecca Martinez was the first to arrive, driving the same practical sedan she had been using since Jake restructured his business. She had become not just Jake's CFO, but a close friend to both of them and the operational manager of the cooperative. "Ready for the big announcement?" Rebecca asked as she climbed the porch steps. "As ready as we'll ever be," Lucy replied. "Over." The next hour, families arrived from ranches across the region. The Petersons brought their teenage daughter, who was planning to study agricultural business in college and return to run the family operation. The Morrisons came with their twin boys, who had become experts at handling cattle despite being only 12 years old. There were new faces too, families who had heard about the cooperative's success and wanted to join. The meeting was held in the new community center that had been built on Lucy's property, funded by the cooperative and designed to serve as headquarters for their shared operations. Jake had insisted that the building be constructed on Lucy's land because she was the president of the cooperative, but everyone knew it was really because this ranch had become the heart of everything they were trying to accomplish. "Before we get to our regular business," Lucy announced once everyone was seated, "Jake and I have something we'd like to share with all of you." Jake stood up beside her, looking slightly uncomfortable with being the center of attention. Despite running a billion-dollar company for years, he had never gotten used to personal announcements. As most of you know, Jake began, Lucy and I have been working together for the past year to build this cooperative into something that can support all of our families for generations to come. He paused and reached for Lucy's hand. What you might not know is that somewhere along the way, we fell in love with each other as much as we fell in love with this project. We're getting married, Lucy announced, unable to keep the smile off her face. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Frank Peterson stood up and started clapping loudly, followed by his wife Carol, who immediately started planning the reception in her head. The younger members of the cooperative whistled and shouted congratulations, while the older ranchers nodded approvingly. "About time," called out Jim Morrison. "We've been waiting for you two to figure it out for months." After the celebration died down, they moved on to cooperative business. Rebecca presented financial reports showing that their shared beef marketing program had increased profits for every member ranch by an average of 40%. The equipment sharing program had saved each family thousands of dollars in machinery costs, and the joint veterinary services had improved herd health across all the participating ranches. "We've also gotten approval to expand the program," Rebecca announced. "We have applications from 12 more families who want to join, and the state agricultural department has asked us to help develop similar cooperatives in other regions." After the meeting, as the other families were leaving, Lucy and Jake found themselves alone in the community center, cleaning up chairs and stacking papers. "Do you ever miss it?" Lucy asked. "The old life, the corporate world, having unlimited money?" Jake considered the question seriously. "I miss some things. I miss the efficiency of having a staff to handle details. I miss being able to solve problems just by writing checks. But I don't miss feeling disconnected from the actual work." "What do you mean?" "When I was running Harrison Ranch Holdings, I made decisions that affected thousands of people, but I never really understood how those decisions changed their daily lives. Now, I know what it feels like when the tractor breaks down, when a cow gets sick, when the weather doesn't cooperate." "With your plans," Lucy smiled, "and you like that better?" "I like feeling like my work matters in a direct, tangible way. I like knowing that the decisions we make here will help families stay on their land and build something they can pass on to their children. Even if it means getting up at 5 in the morning to check on cattle? Especially because it means getting up at 5 in the morning to check on cattle? With you?" They finished cleaning up and walked outside where the sun was setting over the pastures. Lucy's cattle were settling down for the night, and in the distance she could see lights coming on in the houses of their cooperative neighbors. "Jake," Lucy said as they walked toward the house, "what really made you decide to give up your fortune?" Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. "You want the honest answer?" "Always." "It was something you said during one of our conversations. By the fire, back when you thought I was just a drifter. You said that your great-grandfather had built this ranch from nothing, because he believed that land and hard work were the only things that couldn't be taken away from you." "I remember that. I realized that I had inherited everything I owned. I had never built anything myself, never risked failure, never felt the satisfaction of creating something from nothing. I wanted to know what that felt like. And now, you know." Jake looked around at the ranch they had built together, the community center that housed their cooperative, the relationships they had formed with families across the region. "Now I know," he said, "and it's better than anything money can buy." They walked into the house where their relationship had begun, past the fireplace where they had shared so many evening conversations, and into the kitchen where Jake had cooked breakfast with mysterious supplies on that first morning after the storm. "One more question," Lucy said as they settled on the couch with glasses of wine to celebrate their engagement. "What would have happened if I hadn't invited you in that night? If I had left you at the fence to freeze?" Jake laughed. "I probably would have died of hypothermia, and none of this would have happened. Seriously, I think I would have eventually found another way to learn about the challenges facing family ranchers, but I would never have found you. And this whole project would have been just business instead of something personal and meaningful. So you're saying I saved your life in more ways than one?